Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Baggott, I'm the founder of Car Dealer magazine, and today on the show I'm absolutely delighted to be chatting to Steve Fowler. He's the editor-in-chief of Auto Express, Car Buyer and Driving Electric. Good afternoon, Steve.
Afternoon, James.
Nice to see you. Thanks very much for giving up your time today. Now, just for those people who don't know Steve, he's been a motoring journalist for more years than he'd probably care for me to mention here. Before taking over at Auto Express, he was previously editor-in-chief of What Car for more than 18 years. So he's got some fantastic experience in the motor industry, and he's going to give us some of that insight today. Steve, firstly, I'd like to kick off with the 70 plate change that has obviously just happened. Dealers up and down the country are seeing some booming sales, actually. I think a lot of that has been led by some deals that manufacturers are doing. What sort of deals have you seen? Have any caught your eye out there?
Yeah, there's some manufacturers playing some games that we wouldn't normally see in terms of discounts. I'm a big fan. I don't like to go straight in with a plug with a website called Leasing.com, which I don't allow my team to get on there before 11 o'clock in the morning. Otherwise, you waste the whole day just looking at the deals. But just going on there, you get a very, very clear indication of who is pushing quite hard, pushing the cars onto the market. The other trick, of course, is to have a look on the Motability website and see which cars are going with no upfront payment, and they're the ones that the manufacturers are pushing hard. And we're seeing some premium brands that we don't normally see pushing hard, really offering some fantastic deals on things. And of course, electric vehicles. You know, one of the best deals I was looking at was on the new Renault Zoe, which I think is a fantastic car. But clearly, manufacturers are going to have to push these cars because the emissions targets are still there set in stone and still got to be reached.
Yeah, funny to say about leasing.com. I mean, I've checked out that website this week, looking for a lease on an E2008. I had one in on test last week. Absolutely loved it. I think it's a brilliant car. But the price of those, I mean, you could get one of those for about £240 a month on a lease with a month down.
Yeah.
I mean, there clearly are some manufacturers out there that are pushing hard, especially on those electric vehicles you mentioned. Do you think customers now have accepted leases and those different ways of buying vehicles?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a slight shift. I mean, we all know what the success of PCPs have been. And I remember sitting on a panel a while ago and asked what the greatest automotive invention of recent years was. And I said the PCP, because it's brilliant, because people have to go back to the dealership at the end of the 2, 3, 4 year term. So it's a fantastic innovation. So people are used to that. People are shopping by their monthly budget, and I think leasing is just the obvious next step on from a PCP. And people are so clued up these days to do the maths. The thing I always say to consumers, say it's very, very easy to buy a car badly, very difficult to buy a car well. So you've got to spend your time doing your homework, doing your research, doing the maths, and people are realizing actually a straight lease, I'm not really bothered about owning the car at the end of the period. Chances are I might not have any equity to move into the next deposit on a PCP. So why not just go for a straight lease? There's not an awful lot to worry about. Of course, as everybody says, that's what we all do with our mobile phones.
Well, and that would be my point, Steve. Do you think the days of owning a car have pretty much been forgotten? I mean, now it's merely something you just pay a monthly figure for. I mean, it has changed the way that we have bought cars, hasn't it? Completely.
Yeah. I think that's what ownership is. Basically, it's just having the car. How you pay for it is, and let's be honest. You know, we all say we own our houses, but it's the mortgage companies that own our houses. So ownership means different things to different people. But yeah, what is it? It's in excess of 90% of all retail purchases are done on a finance agreement, mostly on PCPs at the moment. So it is the norm. It's what people expect and what people accept.
And it's those PCPs that weren't renewed during lockdown that is driving a sales boom at the moment. I mean, a lot of customers now back in dealerships in June, July, August, renewing those deals that they missed out on earlier this year. I mean, I'm hearing that September could be the busiest and biggest month ever for the car industry in terms of sales. Dash Gupta from Marshall Motor Group said that. We've reported this morning on Robert Forrester from Virtue Motors saying exactly the same thing. I mean, what's going on out there in your mind, Steve? Are you seeing that on your websites and magazines?
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. Magazine sales have started picking up, but more importantly, what we're seeing on our websites is there's a huge amount of traffic. So the interest is there. If you look at one of our websites, for example, Car Buyer, the clue's in the name. You're only going to come there if you're interested in buying a car. Really, that's what it exists for. That's who it serves. And we are seeing the highest ever traffic numbers on Car Buyer. So the interest is definitely there. As you say, there's a lot of pent up demand. People who've come to the end of the PCPs. As I mentioned before, what a great innovation. You come to the end of the PCP, you've got to go back and see your dealer. So there's a lot of people who've been waiting to go and have that conversation with their dealer. And nobody's going to buy a car with a 20 plate when there's a 70 plate coming in a few weeks' time. So there's that natural demand for people wanting the latest registration number, and an awful lot of pent-up demand as well. So September is looking very, very good. It's a little bit like the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which I know Dash was very, very fond of. How that will continue through the rest of the year remains to be seen. But there's a degree of buoyancy in the market and degree of positivity amongst the OEMs that says that in the fourth quarter, we could be back to where we were last year. Now, last year wasn't great, let's remind ourselves. But it's not all doom and gloom in spite of the dreadful first 6 months that we've had of the year.
Steve, do you buy into this term that we're starting to hear a little bit more often, again, probably because it's been coined by our friend Dash Gupta, this revenge buying term? I think what we mean by that is people who are pretty much fed up with lockdown. They've had a poor time of it, haven't been able to go on holiday, got a little bit of money in the bank, and decided, right, I'm going to go out there and treat myself to a new set of wheels. I mean, do you think that rings true?
I think there's a degree of that, yes. I think certainly the people who were planning big holidays in 2020 and spending a considerable amount of cash, as anybody who's got a family knows how much it takes to take a large family away somewhere decent on holiday. It costs pretty much the same as certainly a decent deposit on a new car. So yeah, maybe revenge buying is an odd phrase perhaps, but yeah, I think there's a lot of people thinking, do you know what? I'm okay. I'm reasonably comfortable that I'm not actually going to lose my job. Things are reasonably secure. So why not buy a new car? And the chances are many people will actually need a new car anyway. The other thing to bear in mind is new cars at the moment, they've never been better. You've got the choice of powertrains, which I know we'll talk about. But in terms of the technology, the safety tech, the connectivity, it's very, very tempting, shall we say, to upgrade. There's an awful lot of people thinking, hang on, I've got this car that does that. I could have a car that does this. And the monthly payment, crucially, might not be that much different. Then it's still hugely tempting.
Steve, do you think the fact that the industry is in the situation it is now, it's had a very buoyant restart, do you think that has killed off the chance of an incentive like a scrappage scheme or anything else coming from the government for good? I mean, Mike Hawes told us that the government's very, very closely following what's happening in dealerships. I mean, when you're reporting on the sorts of things we are and you are, it's going to be hard, isn't it, for this industry to then go cap in hand to the government, surely?
Yeah, I think the idea of a scrappage scheme, and I know this will probably be held against me at some stage, I think would be very, very unlikely to see it. Of course, Weird Auto Express broke the story when we actually spoke to the Department for Business, Education, Industry, I can't remember what the BEIS, whatever.
We call them BEIS for ease.
BEIS, that's it. That's a familiar name. Yeah, they told us that we've got absolutely no plans for it. There's a lot of people in the industry hoping for it, and a lot of consumers were actually waiting for it. We could still do with some clarity, but I think when the industry is saying, actually, things are looking pretty good at the moment, you're unlikely to get it. And the other thing to bear in mind is the deals that are out there at the moment, whether that's support that's coming from manufacturers or from dealers, is hugely tempting for customers already.
And I suppose when other industries are in desperate situations too, I mean, the airline industry for one, it's going to be very hard for the automotive industry to fight for their slice of that cash, isn't it?
Yeah, I think any politician that suddenly favours one industry over another is a little bit foolish. I think it's very unlikely. But as I say, the bottom line is if the government's looking and the industry itself is saying September's looking pretty good for us, now's not a time to be introducing a scrappage scheme. Whether it might come next year if things aren't picking up at all, then it remains to be seen. But it comes back to the point. I remember talking to Stephen Norman, the chairman of Vauxhall. Now, he's a guy who's been in the industry a long time. If you ever want a good quote, go to Stephen. He knows what he's talking about. He knows the industry inside out. And he said that with so many people on these finance deals, you're always going to get a natural flow of people coming back into the showroom, which, again, sorry to repeat myself, comes back to that point about the greatest innovation being the PCP. There is going to be a natural flow of people wanting to change their cars.
So what are your thoughts, Steve, then towards the end of this year? We've mentioned Q4. We reported on Car Dealer of the Weekend about the biggest concerns dealers have, and they told us a lot of it centres on the end of furlough at the end of October, rising unemployment, Brexit on the horizon. Do you think we're basically in a bit of a heyday now, and towards the end of this year it's going to go south?
Yeah, well, as I said, Stephen Norman and the likes of Stephen have said that they expect Q4 to be very similar to what it was last year, which, let's be honest, if we thought of that earlier this year, we'd have taken it, wouldn't we? We'd have been very, very happy with that. There's no doubt that there are troubled times ahead. You mentioned the B word. Brexit has been off the agenda really for the past few months, haven't it? We've had far more important things to worry about. Now, that is a big concern for manufacturers, dealers, and consumers. The end of furlough, absolutely. When people start to realize more and more people are losing their jobs, then that also is a worry. So there are definitely challenge times ahead, but the manufacturers and the dealers need to make sure they're in the best shape possible to ride what could be fairly choppy waters over the coming months. Going back to the furlough thing, one industry insider who shall remain completely nameless said to me, well, most people who are likely to lose their jobs aren't particularly the people who are going to be buying new cars anyway. I'll leave them to decide. That's a pretty tricky thing to say in my book, but it's another reason why he felt fairly buoyant around the rest of the year.
What are your thoughts, Steve, on the likes of other manufacturers following the same way that Mitsubishi has gone? They've taken a drastic decision to quit Europe and by not developing any more cars for Europe. I mean, it's effectively killed off the brand. I mean, some dealers told us that they had enough stock basically to last them till March, and then pretty much that brand's going to disappear from UK shores. Do you think anybody else is going to go the same way? Any other manufacturers?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I'm not really surprised by Mitsubishi's decision. I think there are other manufacturers looking at not only the UK, but Europe as a whole and saying, do I really need to bother? It is an important market. I'm sure there are people looking at it. And it's very interesting as well, if you talk to a lot of people about what the future of the industry holds, undoubtedly we're going to see more mergers. Stellantis, a wonderful name, FCA, PSA coming together. You've got to look at that group and think, does it need all those brands? Everybody's looked and held up the Volkswagen group as the model of excellence in how you manage brands, whether it's Audi, Volkswagen, Seat, and Skoda. But Stellantis will have Vauxhall and Opel, Citroën, Peugeot, DS, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Fiat. It's got even more. Does it need all those brands? I've got to sort of point my finger at DS, and I know that's playing a long game, but amongst all those brands, do you need DS as well as Alfa Romeo, for example? Certainly very interesting from a consumer point of view to have all that choice. And I think that's going to be a really interesting group to watch. But undoubtedly there will be, it always happens. We lost Saab, we lost Rover, we're losing Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi will continue to sell in other territories, obviously, but it will happen. Quite which ones it's going to be, we can point fingers and say it could be that one, it could be that one, but there are undoubtedly a lot of OEMs thinking, is it worth it? Is Europe worth it? But just as importantly, is the UK worth it with right-hand drive and other complexities? Is the UK a market we need to bother with?
And obviously, the other thing that we've got on the horizon is these emissions changes and the huge fines that manufacturers are going to be facing if they don't meet them. And on the other hand, you have the development cycle has been hugely hit by the pandemic. What do you think we're going to see any special models or specific models disappear from our shores too?
Yeah, I think sadly we will. It's not always the ones that people are demanding. Things like small automatic cars, for example, we've already seen a lot of those cars disappear. Not a huge demand for those sort of vehicles. Yes, you could argue you could push those people into electric cars, which are all automatics. Then you've got to just look at the cars with the big engines. The V8 powered things that you and I love so much. Let's just hope that Mercedes keep bringing their E63s and E43s and everything else to market, but we might see fewer of those sort of cars. As you say, every manufacturer has emissions targets to meet, and it's increasingly difficult to justify vehicles that pollute more than an electric vehicle might do otherwise.
And at the same time, Steve, you've got a government that's considering bringing forward its ban on petrol and diesel cars to 2030. That's just 10 short years away. Is this industry ready for that change?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And the thing we always want from government, and we don't seem to be getting on at any form, is clarity. So is it 2035? Is it 2032? Could it be 2030? Now, 2030 is going to be a real stretch for the industry. As you said, it's only 10 years away. Ultimately, we know the way the market is going. We also know, and I firmly believe, there's not a person buying a new car today for whom the thought of an electric vehicle doesn't flash across their mind. They might think, oh, no, not yet. I'll come back to that. But it does mean that next time it'll be more likely that they will go electric. So people are aware of the move that needs to take place to electrification. The manufacturers are well aware of that. They're increasingly aware of the need to sell more electric cars to get their average CO2 levels down. But the complete ban of vehicles with internal combustion engines by 2030, or certainly cars, it's going to be really, really tough to meet. But then, having said that, this is the most fantastic of industries, the innovation and the sheer cleverness of the people involved. It's best when it has its back to the wall and when it's challenged. I've got no doubt that it would rise to that challenge, but it's going to be difficult.
So, Steve, I saw you posting on this week. It might have even been yesterday about Fiat 500 electric. Saying how much you loved that car. What other new cars are you most excited about coming up this year?
Yeah, I must admit I am an electric car fan. I do love electric cars. I kind of get them as well. I know they're not for everybody, but the Fiat 500 for me was something that just hit the nail on the head in terms of the right car for the right market for the right time. And if the rumours I'm hearing about pricing on that sort of thing, starting potentially after the grant at around 21,000, 22,000, still a lot of cash, but all of a sudden electric cars start to make sense. The Volkswagen ID3 as well is something that I'm really, really looking forward to driving. But then we've already seen a lot of great cars come to the market already. The new Skoda Octavia is a car I haven't personally driven yet. I'm desperate to drive one because a lot of my colleagues have said how good that car is. Better than the Golf, whisper it quietly. So there's plenty of great stuff coming. The new Mercedes S-Class as well, I'm really looking forward to, because we know what we see in an S-Class, that technology sort of rolls down through the range. And then, of course, new BMW M3 coming. You've got to love those sort of things. The great thing about this industry is it just doesn't stop. It is incessant in terms of the new technology, the new models that are coming. And that doesn't seem to have slowed up yet. Yes, they're going to have to start sort of focusing more on vehicles with alternative fuels, whether that's a plug-in hybrid or a fully electric vehicle. But it doesn't seem to be slowing down at the moment. Look at Volkswagen, for example. They've got the stream of internal combustion engine cars led by the Golf, and then they've got a stream of fully electric vehicles led by the ID3. The cost of developing those is huge. That has to be adjusted at some stage. But we're so lucky, whether it's at dealer level, at OEM level, or us who just happen to sort of sit and enjoy writing and driving these cars. It's a great time to be in this business.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. The other thing I'm hearing is there's anecdotal evidence and people mentioning that during the lockdown, they've really had the time to consider an electric car. They've gone out there and done some research, they've watched the videos, and they've decided that now's the time for them to make that switch. Have you got any evidence of that from your websites and the sorts of searches that people doing? Does that ring true to you?
Definitely, yeah. We know that there is more interest in those sort of vehicles. I get a report every day. The most read stories on our website, Fiat 500 electric has gone incredibly well. But the really interesting thing that we notice is the amount of time that people who are looking for electric cars spend on our websites. Quite often people will have an idea of the car that they will want to look at. They'll come in, they'll read the review, they might read 2 or 3 others, a bit of advice. But the people looking at electric cars really are doing their research. They're really drilling much deeper into the information. They're spending longer on our sites, and they're more thoughtful about it. As I said, I think there's a lot of people who are thinking, electric cars, I need to check this out. Might not be right for me this time around, but more likely next time around. But also around electric cars, there's just so many questions. I had an email from somebody who'd read my report. I've got a BMW X5 45e, the plug-in hybrid, who asked me a simple question. Said, when you run out of charge, and I know it goes quite a way, it does about 45 miles on a charge, is it a hybrid still? Now, that's something from a communication point of view we need to do a better job of, the OEMs need to do a better job of, and the dealers need to do a better job, just telling people, yes, it runs as a hybrid when you've run out of charge. There are so many questions that people need answered. Can I drive it through a car wash for an electric car? That sort of stuff. It might be a bit trite, but people do actually ask it. That dealers and manufacturers and we as information providers need to up our game and think about all the sort of slightly weird and wonderful questions and concerns that people have over those vehicles.
And dealers especially need to really be on their game when it comes to these things. I mean, before it was a case of, do you want a petrol, diesel, manual, automatic? Now there's this huge plethora of different options on all those fronts. It's very difficult to describe those and accurately get the right vehicle for the right buyer. When it comes to Auto Express readers, I mean, you've obviously got your finger on the pulse to what consumers think. I mean, what do they think of car dealers at the moment? Have they got better at doing those sorts of jobs?
Am I safe? There are none here, are there? If I'm honest, there's work to be done. But the way I would phrase it is there is a great opportunity for dealers. It's not a great experience, which you'll look and see how many people are actually buying cars online. And part of the Dennis stable is a company called Buy a Car, which is an online used car retailer that is doing phenomenally well. And that's probably because most dealers don't really understand the selling online space, which is somewhere where people definitely want to go. But if I'm honest, the whole dealer experience hasn't changed that much. One of the biggest problems in the industry, and I talk about dealerships and OEMs, is that people within this industry do not go and buy cars. They do not know what it's like as somebody who doesn't know much about cars to walk in through those doors in a slightly nervous fashion, to be faced with these fantastic array of shiny metal and equally shiny suited salespeople who they think it's their job, not necessarily to do them the best deal possible, but to do the deal that the salesperson wants to do. There's still an awful lot of suspicion around the sales process. There's not a lot of enjoyment. And I'm sad to say, I was only talking to somebody yesterday, still a lack of customer service. One person who's ready to buy and has been into 2 dealers, whether it's because it's September, it's busy, but no feedback at all. Nobody offering quotes, nobody contacting them when they said they would do. And sadly, that is all too common a story, pretty much from most people who I have contact me. They haven't had the greatest experience. And that's something that the industry really needs to address. It's got a real image problem. In the meantime, particularly on the used car side, and it won't be too long before it follows on the new car side, you've got these new online retailers such as Buy a Car, and Kazoo and Kazam, and you name the fancy array of letters that don't mean something rude in Swahili. It's a new brand that comes up and is selling cars online, but that is what people want, because part of it is they don't necessarily enjoy the traditional dealership experience. So the dealer group that takes that opportunity, grabs it and provides that level of service and an online service is the ones that are going to do best.
Well, you'll be pleased to hear Pendragon this morning announced to the stock market that they're going to be investing huge amounts of money into doing exactly that and taking on the likes of Kazoo and Kazam with an online offering. I'm really interested to hear your take on online used car buying specifically. Are customers ready to do that? Do you think customers will buy and are confident to buy used cars completely online?
Well, we're seeing it ourselves. The growth on buy a car is huge. I'm amazed by it, to be perfectly honest, and I'm also amazed that it's used cars because there's greater variety in condition. So I'm surprised by it, but it certainly seems to be happening. Yes, it does seem to be a much younger demographic. If you look at the sort of people who are buying cars through buy a car, it's a much younger person than we are perhaps used to seeing in showrooms. But it's definitely happening, and I say the opportunity is huge there. Be interesting to see what Pendragon does, but it's something that we haven't seen dealers do for a while. It's one of those things as well that's always surprised me, is that the dealerships have never really pushed their own brands that much, whether it's Vertu or Pendragon or Marshalls. You don't necessarily buy from those. People say, well, I bought it from my local Ford dealer. Okay, who runs the franchise? Don't know. So they think they're buying from the OEM rather than from the franchise holder or from the dealer group. And I think there's a big job that needs to be done around brand there, particularly when you've got some new used online retailers spending so much putting their shirts on rubbish football teams and spending so much on television advertising as well.
A lot of money to be spent there, isn't there? So, Steve, tell me a little bit about how Auto Express has coped with the pandemic. I mean, having worked on the weekly car magazine, well, God, I can't remember how long ago, but it was tough then with lots of people in the office. It must have been pretty hard when there's none of you in the office and you're doing it all via Zoom calls.
Do you know what? It's gone amazingly well, and it's always down to the team. We've always employed the best people, as you're proof yourself as a former Auto Express employee. We've got a great team of people, and we started to we've been working from home quite a lot over the past year, probably starting to introduce it. We already had all the technology. The biggest problem was when we couldn't drive cars, but in terms of the production process, the team have been great. We are opening the office gradually towards the end of the year. We've spoken to the team and said, how many of you want to come back? Oh, I might come back a day a week, or maybe 2 days a week just to see everybody. But we've coped really, really well. It's a digital world. Getting the magazine out hasn't been a problem. The websites have worked very well. We've had remote working for a long, long time. So it's gone surprisingly well. And it's what journalists do best. They're creative. They find solutions to problems. So it's been a pleasure to watch.
And Steve, finally, I know a big source of news for you guys is always the big motor shows. We've obviously missed out on Geneva. I'm pretty sure it was Paris this year, and that's been cancelled too. Do you think motor shows are dead forever?
That's a really, really difficult question. I mean, if I was a manufacturer, I thought for a long time, would I be spending money going to motor shows? And I know that the likes of Ford, for example, have created their own motor show where they can control the messaging. They don't have to fight for share of voice with other people. I hope that we will continue to see some motor shows. I don't think we will see as many motor shows, but the most important thing about any business, particularly this business, is the relationships and being able to go and meet people and talk to the people and look at the products in the metal. Seeing something in the metal, there's no substitute for it, rather than just seeing it in a two-dimensional fashion. But it's those relationships and being able to talk to people and do deals and to build relationships is something that motor shows do give us. And let's hope we don't lose it completely.
Yeah, I think I'd miss our annual trip to Geneva, that's for sure, if only if it's to see the snow once a year. So.
Or buy the chocolate at the duty free on the way home. Yeah.
Indeed. Steve, thanks ever so much for giving up your time today. It's been really good to hear from you. Thank you. So on Friday, my colleague James Baggott will be back. He's going to be chatting to ASC Global Chairman Mike Jones about the latest new car registration figures that come out for August on Friday morning. And if you haven't already, please make sure you check out our digital Car Dealer magazine, issue 150. We've put a huge amount of time and effort into that. It's been designed for your digital format. So take a look at that. We've got an interview with Peter Vardy amongst many other things. Thanks once again for Steve for joining me today, and I will see you soon. Thanks again. Goodbye.